Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. This is John L. Pinnell. I'm your host, designated report behind the lens. This is season 2, episode 3. And today's episode is brought to you by Spokesio. It's an app for all athletes. You upload your highlights, your mixtapes, your training, and it allows you to connect to other athletes and scouts across the globe. If you're an athlete and you're looking to connect with some people, please download this app. You won't be disappointed. I've been trying to sit down with this man for a while. He's busy. He's got a lot going on. And like I said, I'm glad that we're able to finally link and talk some sports, talk some photography. I am here with Kevin. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good, man. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me on. How are you doing?
I'm great. Where it feels like we see the light at the end of the tunnel with COVID and everything. So
Hopefully.
Yeah, I'm hoping things start to get back to normal a little bit soon. But tell me a little bit about yourself. I know you're down in Miami. How old are you? Are you originally from there? Tell me a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, no, man. I am 28 years old. Just turned 28 March 5th. So what?
Oh, happy
2
belated.
weeks. Appreciate that. I'm originally from Puerto Rico.
Okay.
I've been in Miami, going on year 2 now of living here. So pretty recent move. But just loving it down here. It's close to my culture, close to my little island. It's a 2-hour plane ride back home, so I can't complain much. That's about as close as I'll get.
How long have you been in the States? Did you move from Puerto Rico to Miami?
No, so I originally moved from Puerto Rico to Iowa. So I used to work at Iowa State in 2012, I believe, 2011, 2012. I moved from Iowa, and okay, don't quote me on the year. Yeah, I've been 5 years in the States.
Okay.
You can do the math. And I moved to Iowa just for the job. Found the job on Indeed.com, applied for it. Shot my shot.
Absolutely.
And just happened to land this graphic design job, and made the move. Was there for 2 years, year and a half, and then after that moved down to Alabama.
Okay.
To work at Auburn, and from Auburn I got the job offer to come down to Miami after a year and a half, and
that's awesome.
Now I'm here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Definitely a lot of different cultures. How was Iowa?
It wasn't bad. It was just, obviously, it's the initial culture shock, living in this small little island, and then moving to Iowa, just, whoa, completely different.
Absolutely.
Then you're dealing with the cold. Like, we're talking negative 30s, negative 20s. Yeah. The lowest I've ever experienced was like low 60s.
Yeah.
So this to me is just wild. Yeah, no. It was full of great people. I can't complain at all about my time there, but obviously, dealing with the cold and just the slight difference in culture, it made sense for me to make the move.
Absolutely. So, did you come from a graphic design background? Like, had you gone to school for it, or how did you? I know you said you shot your shot at Iowa. What kind of background did you have prior to putting in your application?
So honestly, as far as like work experience goes, I technically had none. Like I had done, I had done a few things. We had a couple buddies that we covered college sports back, in college, but we did it for free. So like, it wasn't like anybody was paying us. So we would do like a live stream, like a Facebook Live type of stream.
Yep.
I would make some graphics leading up to it that were like, hey, watch us today or whatever. Sure. This is the team that's going to play. So that was mainly my experience, was more so just, doing these graphics with the little crew I knew, and then some paid work for TV broadcast, but it was bare bones. My degree is in graphic design, but my college wasn't really tailored to sports.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
It was more so tailored to like the agency work and all of that. And we know sports is kind of like its own little beast.
Absolutely. So when you got there, you really had to kind of learn on the fly.
Yeah,
and
it was
how was that
definitely a learning experience.
I can bet.
It was a lot of trial and error. I'd say more error than anything. It was a lot of I was fortunate to have a really good boss in Mary Pink, who kind of taught me the ropes in a way of she's the marketing, right? She was the marketing director, and she's teaching me, hey, these are the things that other colleges are doing from a marketing standpoint as far as graphics go.
Sure.
Let's try to aim for these, because I didn't really have my own style back then. I wasn't sure what I was really doing, if I'm being honest.
Yeah.
So learning everything was just it was difficult. It was difficult, but very well worth it though.
That's awesome. So got in the front door with graphic design. That's what your degree's in. How did you start to implement the photography portion of it?
So initially at Iowa State, I had a chance one game to kind of try and dabble in photography. I will tell you right off the bat, the results were awful. I don't have a single photo from that experience because they were just awful. So we nixed that. No more photography at Iowa State. Like I'll stick to design. Yeah. When I got to Auburn, though, kind of again got the opportunity to, hey, do you want to dabble in some photography? Like, we could use an extra set of hands if you're willing. Sure. I was like, sure, but then I kept showing up, and I kept, going to practices or trying to go walk somewhere with a camera. Like I bought my own little, humble camera and started taking photos here and there of just anything I could. Yeah. Which ultimately led to me really being at basically almost all the men's basketball games for Auburn. And some women's games. And then the women's team, they needed a photographer to go with them for the SEC tournament. Yeah. And I was like, hey, I'm down. Sure, why not? Yeah. So I got to cover that tournament, on my own, the travel, the actual game, the in-betweens. And I think that was really like the learning experience for me. Yeah. Was knowing, okay, it's not just taking the photo. It's you got to take the photo, you got to edit the photo, you got to send the photos over. It's the whole process, and this is quick. So really, that tournament really made me kind of open my eyes, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful because if I wouldn't have had that experience, maybe I wouldn't have been able to come down to Miami and tell them, hey, I've done some in-game photography. Yep. Like I kind of know what I'm doing. But then here at Miami, like I feel like it's just taken off. I've had hundreds of opportunities. It's incredible, the opportunities I've had. And, every day is kind of just another, I guess, learning, whatever, another step in the process to learn.
Absolutely. And that's a perfect segue. I see you're covering everything down there. It's not just basketball and football. You're doing track and field. I think I saw some softball or baseball or something like that. You're doing everything. How do you like that? Did you play any sports growing up to where you can kind of, plug yourself into any of these situations and kind of know what's going on so that you can frame your shots and things like that? Or is this all just trial and error over the past few years?
So I played basketball. I didn't make it to college, but I played basketball. So I know the sport. I also was a very big, baseball person. Like I would love watching baseball. So I knew the sport too, to kind of, try and get my shot. I knew nothing about football. To this day, football is like the sport I least know about.
Okay.
which is shocking. But yeah, it's a very interesting sport that I'm still trying to pick up on. And but yeah, honestly, like here, the thing with Miami is, we're all just helping each other out. We don't really have an in-house photographer. We do have there are some photographers that we have that will cover events for us. But whenever you need one practice covered or just the subtle small event, that's where we all chime in. So it's a big,
Gotcha.
really, it's a big group contribution, which I'm grateful that I get to take part of.
Yeah.
But yeah, basketball is the only sport I actually played. Everything else is more trial and error. Like track and field, I'm learning. I'm still learning. It's a learning curve.
Yeah.
Football, like I said, I'm learning. Tennis, I kind of know. If the ref says it's out, then I know it's out, mainly. but yeah, I mean, basketball is the one sport that I will confidently say I understand what is going on.
Yeah, and I can definitely relate. I had one of my friends, she was the head coach of our high school lacrosse team. And she called me one day, hey, can you come take pictures? And the pictures came out okay, but I had no idea what's going on. So I didn't know where to go, where to stand, which is a big part of photography. I learned very quickly. So I think I covered them for 2 years. And by the end of the 2 years, I understood the game more to where some of the shots were just better because I was better prepared for what was going to happen, or I was able to anticipate a little bit better. So I absolutely understand where you're coming from with just kind of learning the game and trial and error and having just kind of growing through that, right?
Yeah, and one thing that's also helped me is I've had sort of a mentor in like Eric Espada, who shoots for UM.
Mm-hmm.
I will literally finish shooting a photographing an event, and I will send him pictures and be like, okay, what do you think? And I'll tell me, oh, this is good, this is bad. Check your horizons on this one. Edit it a little less. All that helps. All that is
Absolutely.
so useful because, you tend to have your own style, but when somebody else looks at it and can tell you, hey, you're not looking at this because for your style, you think this photo works, but you got to also think about the bigger picture. Like, you're not the only one using this picture.
Absolutely.
This is going to be used by a lot of different people. So, and that's helped me tremendously. Like, he's helped me with gear, with photos, just being there and telling me, stand here because the play is going to happen here. Like, all that helps at the end of the day. So very grateful for him.
That's awesome. You mentioned gear just now. When you said you started off, you kind of bought something to get by. Do you have your own camera, lens? Do you have a whole setup of your own now?
Yeah. I have 2 camera bodies. I stayed with my humble one, the Nikon D7200. That was the first camera I've ever bought. Then I also have a D4, a Nikon D4. I have the 85 1.8, a 35, a 70-200, a 24-70. Like, I'm trying to stack up as much as I can.
Absolutely. And that 70-200, that's like standard. Everybody needs that in their kit.
Yeah. That's the baby right there.
Yeah, it's good for everything. So I know that you're covering a lot of different sports. I know you said basketball is the one that you understand the most. Mm-hmm. Is that also your favorite sport to shoot?
Yes, 100%. As far as you can just get it all. You can get the big play, you can get the reactions. I love covering basketball, whether that's women's, men's. I just love basketball in general. I'd say track and field is really, really getting, fighting it out because because it has so many different events that it's just, there's never a dull moment,
Sure.
And obviously football is fun. The pads, the helmets, football can make some great images. But there's also so many good football photographers that anytime I upload one picture, I'm like, oof, I got to think about this one.
Yeah. When it comes to the basketball games that you covered, is there a particular game or a particular play or anything like that that sticks out in your mind where you're like, I really got that. I got that shot.
Yeah, well, I mean, as far as this year goes, there's two photos that I really like. One I turned into like a burst GIF.
Yep.
It was one of our guards. He just went in straight up, two-handed dunk, came out at the end with like the and like a little scream, and I thought that was cool. And then for women's basketball, same thing. One of our guards, I think it was an and one, but just her reaction and the way I was able to frame the photo with like, it was against UNC. So we had a UNC player, and then the Miami player was just literally right next to her with the big scream reaction. So those two were my favorites of at least the year. Obviously in a COVID time, like I wasn't shooting from the same type of angles that I would normally shoot. So it was challenging, but it was fun.
That's awesome. So you mentioned especially the women's basketball game that you just mentioned. And I don't know if I saw it, but it feels like there's like some foreground and like just some things that you're working with in terms of like framing and composing the shot. If I were to ask you, or if I were to ask you, just, hey, Kevin, I'm shooting a basketball game, whatever the case is. What makes a good photo to you? If I was asking for your advice.
Oh man, that's a hard one, because like as far as a good photo for press or something, well, you probably, obviously your horizon lines, you want to make sure everything is straight in the photo, please.
Absolutely. Please.
For basketball, like the ball, I personally don't like it when the ball is like touching the ground, that it almost looks like deflated. So you want to catch it like kind of midair. I just feel like the dribble, like the dribble drive, is one of my favorite photos in basketball. Like to me, that's nice, and obviously the reaction, but you don't get that every single play.
Yeah.
But now, if you ask me about like my own personal style, it's negative space.
Really?
I love the negative space, and I love, I don't know, I just love that the composition of like the athlete in the right side, and then just the blank space on the left. I'm thinking probably as a designer, because it's like, oh, I can throw some text in here. But I've seen it, and it just, I like it. I've got a couple shots like that, and they make me happy. So
yeah. And I mean, to a certain extent, that's really what matters. I get, if you have ads or social media or whatever the case is, you do sometimes have to keep in mind who you're shooting for and what you're shooting for. But if you're just out there, I agree with you. The negative space, like, there are definitely photos that I've taken, even like portrait photography, where I'll use that negative space just because I feel like the background does give you something, whatever the background is, like, there's a story to be told with that as well. And then, like you said, with the graphic design, it gives you something to play with. So that's interesting. That's the first time I heard that, but I really like, I agree with you completely.
Yeah. And, like I said, everybody has their own style. So I don't really know if there's a perfect way of photographing. And if there is, I'd love to learn more. Obviously I'm a designer by nature, photographer more by trade. So I'm still learning everything, but at least that's the style I feel like I've developed, is more negative space, clean background, like pure white or pure black, or even like the clouds. I mean, we have amazing backgrounds here in Miami with the palm trees, the clouds. Got to take advantage.
Absolutely. do you have any situations where you made a mistake, whether it's in the actual shot, whether it's in editing or something like that, where you learn from it and you're like, I'm never going to make that same mistake again?
Um, I mean, I've definitely made a lot of mistakes for sure. Uh, Thinking back, I know at Iowa State, like I said, that first and only time I took the camera, it was awful. So I learned don't pick up the camera again there. But I remember I had this like editing style because like we had photographers, they would send me the photos, I would edit, and then we would post on social media.
Sure.
But now me looking back at them and me knowing more about photography, like the way I edited the photos back then, like it just made them look off. I was changing the tones. It wasn't really the photographer's true photo. And now that I know more about it, like I can understand, why some photographers dislike whenever a photo is too altered.
Sure.
But obviously the graphic designer in me wasn't thinking about that. I was just thinking of like, how can I make this cool with like Iowa State colors?
Absolutely.
So now that was definitely a learning experience. I feel like too, if I look back at my old Auburn photos as well, same thing. Some of my lines weren't straight. I could have cropped way more. And all of these things are things that I've been told, hey, maybe if you crop in a little bit tighter on this photo, it makes a more dynamic picture.
Sure.
And obviously you take that advice and you apply it the next time. Lo and behold, it works out, So I feel like I've made mistakes at every stop. Can I pinpoint exactly what they are? Not really, but it was mainly a lot about the composition, like the background being too busy. The horizons lines weren't straight.
Sure.
I wasn't cropping at all at times. So I would give you a photo, and you're getting absolutely everything when all you really want is, the middle piece. Yeah. There's no need to give you the extra, inches or whatever. So I think that's what I would say is, I learned a lot more about composing the shot in camera, trying to compose it more in camera now versus being so dependent on the editing before.
Yeah. Gotcha. And I actually, as you were talking, I remembered what I wanted to ask you, and it kind of ties together. So as somebody who didn't necessarily come from a photography background, do you think that the fact that you didn't necessarily have a formal training in terms of like right and wrong, has that helped you at all? Because I guess I'll say this. I feel like in not knowing the rules, it kind of expands your horizons in terms of what you do and what you'll try. Did you experience any of that? Or again, I know it's been trial and error, but the fact that you didn't come from a traditional photography background, do you think that's helped you at all?
I think so. I mean, I think I tie it back to the design aspect where if you look at designers that don't go through college and have a professor or somebody tell them, hey, this is right, this is wrong.
Yeah.
They're probably way more willing to just try different things.
Yeah.
Whereas someone that went through like a formal training of it will be like, oh, well, I can't try that because I know that's wrong.
Yeah.
It may be technically wrong, but it can still look really good and it can make a unique piece. Yeah. But I think a lot of times we hold ourselves back because we went through some sort of formal training in whatever career that may be, just in general,
Agreed.
So I think not having that training has definitely helped me. Obviously, it's hurt me too, because, I'm not at the level that some other people are, but I think it's helped me not put as much pressure on me. Sure. And hey, if I had one outing where I couldn't just capture anything, that's fine. I learned. Yeah. But now if I would have gone through some sort of formal training, there's no way I could show up to a game and not deliver some good content,
Yeah.
The amount of pressure I would put on myself would be too much.
Yeah.
So I think it's helped. Like, I've always wanted to take some photography classes. Every time I say I'm going to do it, I just forget. So
Yeah. No, and what's funny about that, I actually had this conversation recently with another photographer from around town. And essentially, she just told me, hey, um, because of everything that I've learned, I no longer can do this. And I was like, well, that doesn't make sense. The fact that you have this knowledge now is great. Um, but now you can kind of bend and break the rules.
mhm.
Um, so instead of, again, I'll use me as an example. I pick up a camera and I take a photo or whatever the case is, and I don't know what I'm doing. That's an accident. Whereas if you know the fundamentals, you know aperture and shutter speed and all that good stuff, and lighting, um, from there you can start to play with some of those things to come, to intention. The effect that I got by accident, now I can do it intentionally, and it's
Yep.
repeatable.
Yep.
So, um, yeah, I just wanted to get your input because I do feel like on the one hand, you get people who have no idea what they're doing, and that's not to say that you didn't know what you're doing, but
Yeah,
people who
no,
don't
no.
know what people who don't know what they're doing, and they'll come up with some really cool stuff, and it's kind of by accident. But then once you kind of nail down the fundamentals, now you can, tweak those things and really do it on purpose. And I feel like it gives you a lot more freedom as you move forward. So I'm glad I remember it, honestly. But to get your input on that is interesting.
Yeah, no, that was a great question. And, I always think back to is, and same goes for like design, right? Like whatever I have on my portfolio or on my, my Instagram or my social media,
Yeah.
I want to make sure that I'm able to replicate that at any given moment. Because if a client, whether that's for design or photo,
Mm-hmm.
tells me, hey, I want this exact photo whenever you shoot for us, whenever you photograph for us, or whenever you design something for me. Ooh,
Yeah.
that was an accident. I have no clue how I did that.
Yeah.
Okay, well now now I'm not going to deliver.
Yeah.
So to your point, it starts as an accident, but you want to make sure you keep learning and then it's intentional.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I have a question that I like to ask everybody, get their perspective, their feedback. So I'm absolutely going to ask you, what is the thing that you dislike most about the entire photography process?
What's the thing I dislike the most? Oof. Man, I'm not even gonna lie. I think the selection process for me, because sometimes, I get a little trigger happy
Yep.
and you're at one event and, 2,000, 3,000 photos deep.
Yeah.
And it's rough. And,
Yeah.
there are ways to make it shorter and quicker, but still you got to sit down for at least a solid hour or two, at a minimum, I would say, to kind of go through every single photo and make sure, okay, these are good. And then you start the editing process. So yeah. I would say the selection process for me, because I get trigger happy. I'm not even gonna lie. If I'm feeling good during the event,
Mhm.
oh, I'm photographing away. I'm gonna let that puppy ride.
And that I just want to see for me personally, is that what you do after you take your pictures, you upload them? First thing you do is go through and see which ones you anticipate using?
Yeah, because so Eric, who I mentioned earlier,
Yep.
he's been big on me about, hey, use Photo Mechanic, and Photo Mechanic allows you to like look through every single photo and then make your selections. So you're not editing, so you're not opening all 2,000 photos. No, but instead you're opening, the 100 or 200 that you're gonna edit. So I would definitely say like that's what I do. First thing I'll do is upload them all. All right, I'll make my selections. I'll mark with whatever color. For example, red is the ones I like.
Mhm.
Yellow is like the maybe. And the blue is like, nah, we're not even keeping those.
Sure.
So then after that, like I'll edit my first batch, which is the red. Maybe give it a day. and then I'll edit my yellow batch and see how I feel about them. But yeah,
I like that.
That's kind of my process, and that's big shout out to Eric, because I used to just take 2,000 photos, drop them into Camera Raw, and go by one, just editing all of them.
Huh.
And that's no.
Yeah. Okay. So, on the flip side, what's your favorite thing about the entire photography process?
I feel like my favorite part about it all is the framing, whether that's actually in camera or in post-processing, like with the cropping. Yep. I think that's my favorite part. Because I try to have different variations. Like I try to have like a vertical variation of it and a horizontal version.
Yep.
So I like messing around with how it looks on both ends and how much space can I give it, how much space can I take away. So I always have like 3 or 4 different edits of one photo.
Sure.
Obviously I don't post all 4 of them, but you know, I like to keep them just to kind of know, because sometimes I'll use the one I don't post, I'll use it on a graphic. It looks the same, but it has a little bit more breathing room.
That makes sense.
So it helps.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So last year, 2020, I feel like everybody has PTSD a little bit about about 2020. Obviously COVID and social and racial injustice and all that stuff last year. But we'll focus on the COVID, and it obviously had an effect on you and what you were able to do or not able to do over the last year. Were you able to shoot? Were there any sports going on that you were able to shoot at any point last year?
Yeah, so I was fortunate enough to be able to shoot essentially any sport. Like I was shooting, like I shot football. I guess it's last year, football, but from a distance. I wasn't on the field. I was shooting basketball again from a distance, like bleachers deep. Yeah. But still got the opportunity to shoot those two. I haven't been able to make it out to a baseball game yet, so I don't really know if I were to go where I would be able to, what's kind of like the limit.
Yeah.
But yeah, football and basketball I was able to shoot. And at least it was like I wasn't baseline, but still, just being able to be there. Yeah. It's the opportunity that, not a lot of people got to have last year.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I just took it and ran with it. I just tried to do as best as I can, which I think is what everybody tried to do.
Absolutely. And with that, you said you were up in the bleachers, you weren't baseline, you weren't on the sidelines. Mm-hmm. In terms of the photos, ideally these are photos and positions that you're not going to be shooting from regularly.
Yep.
What challenges did you face in trying to get the shot that you wanted, or again, if you're just at a different angle, what challenges did you face in trying to just kind of make the best out of a kind of bad situation?
I'm I love shooting tight shots. So more like portrait style shots, I guess. Yeah. So obviously being at this distance, that's so hard for me to do.
Yeah, it wasn't ideal.
Yeah. And like, especially for basketball, I love those type of shots, like being down low and shooting up, almost like the heroic shot. Being up now, like I can't do that. I was also just shooting, like the only lens I had was like the 70-200. So when you're a couple rows back, the 200 even seems like not enough.
Yeah.
So having to crop in, and now your photo loses a little bit of the quality.
Yeah. So
now you're kind of bummed out. That was, I would say, my biggest struggle, is because I just love the tight, close-up shots. So not being able to do that was definitely very challenging for me. With football, I was fortunate enough that Eric, let me use a 600, which by the way is an amazing lens. That thing is bigger than me. So but I was just happy, so I was able to get some cool stuff with it. But you know, again, same thing, right? Like whenever you're accustomed to shooting a certain style, not being able to do it is so challenging. It doesn't matter if you have a 600 or a 800, it's still challenging. So yeah, that was the biggest hurdle.
Gotcha. And from that, is there any good that came out of your experience last year, or any benefits or anything like that? Learning experience,
definitely.
maybe.
Yeah, definitely. You know, you're finding new angles, right? Like you're finding angles that you normally wouldn't explore.
Yeah.
If we're being honest, because everybody wants to be sidelined at a football game.
Yeah.
But now we're finding out, hey, maybe having a photographer up there all the time isn't bad. Like it could be cool shots that we end up using. For basketball, same thing. Now you know where you can get a good angle from up top, other than the catwalk, right? The other thing too, it's also, you know, expanded me a little bit, I would say, because like I said, my style was more up close shots. Okay, well now I'm being forced to not shoot those.
Yeah.
So how can I still try to make a good image without going to my go-to?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for track. Like track, I'm slowly getting back to my go-to shots, but still, like, you know, it's different, right? So that was a learning experience, and definitely something that I want to apply to everything. Like I want to try to find a high angle for every single sport, because it just looks cool. It's different. Yeah. And it's not the shot that everybody's going to try to get.
Absolutely. And are you covering these sports often enough? So let's take track and field. I know, did the season just start, track and field?
Outdoor season.
Outdoor. Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many like matches or races or whatever that they have, but let's say for argument's sake, there's 10. Do you go into each race, each game, each match with a game plan? Like, hey, I want to get these particular athletes, or I want to get these particular shots, or do you kind of go in like, I'm here to get the best shots possible?
Well, usually, you know, there's a conversation between the SID, the communications person, who, you know, in a lot of these sports is also taking photos. So, you know, we have 2-3 people sometimes. You know, for football, we have a lot of coverage for basketball and all that stuff. So it's always a conversation prior to with whoever else is going to be there. Like, okay, what are you trying to cover? What side are you going to be on? I'll get this other side. Or who are we focusing on tonight? Type of stuff. You always want to cover everything, but there are some days where, you know, I'll use as an example, whatever, let's just use this made up scenario as an example. You know, track. Hey, in this race, we're going to have 4 freshmen. We have no photos of them. So obviously you're going into it knowing you want to get as many images of the freshmen as possible.
Sure. If
there's a senior competing in it, yeah, you'll get a few frames, but you know you can take a few less of them because you already have a lot throughout the years.
Makes sense.
So that's usually the conversation we have prior to any event is, at least for me, is, okay, what graphics do we need? What graphics do we have? And then if I'm helping out from photography, where do you want me to stand? Or where kind of do you want me to be around? And who am I focusing on? If there's no, you know, if there's no specifics, then yeah, I'm just trying to get the best shot possible.
Gotcha.
And like sometimes I'll just try and get creative and fancy with it.
Yeah.
A lot of times it fails, but hey, I'll try.
That's the time to learn, right?
Yeah.
So you've been in the sports, I guess, sports media industry for some years now. So I'm assuming you've had a positive experience considering you're still in it. But how's that experience been for you? Again, starting at Iowa, Auburn, Miami. How has that whole process been over the years since you got in?
It's, I'm not gonna lie, it's honestly been challenging. Being away from your family, not being able to see your family all the time because sports. So, I would assume in a normal job, you have your weekends off or you have, extended vacations and stuff. Whereas in sports, in a year other than 2020, it's a grind. You're barely home. You're seeing, if you're going on vacation, it's maybe once or twice a year.
Yeah.
And this is just me being honest, right?
Yeah.
So that's definitely the challenging part, and that made it really challenging for me, especially when I first moved.
Sure.
Because I'm going from living with my family to living alone.
Yeah.
I got nobody. Auburn made it a little bit easier because now I'm like, okay, now it's a little bit more calm over here. It's warmer. So
yeah.
And then Miami, my neighbors are like my family. So I have that family feeling. I have it right here. So that's great for me, right? But overall, it's been challenging, but it's rewarding.
Sure.
It's rewarding in the sense of whenever you do something, you're doing this for the student athletes, and they're so appreciative. Like a lot of them are very appreciative, and that to me holds so much value.
Absolutely.
But obviously it's challenging because when you're in sports, you don't really get a break.
Yeah.
And I think it's very important, we've seen it a lot, right? The mental health conversations with
Absolutely.
Professional athletes, with, people in the college industry and pro industry. I think that's very important. Mental health is no joke. Like, you got to take that seriously. You need your rest time. And I really, really hope that the future of sports is understanding, that there's a grind, there's a time to grind for sure, but your employees and your people need a time to rest.
Yes.
Because you can't be productive all day, every day.
Yeah.
All year. Like it's just humanly impossible.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And that's, I never really thought about that. I feel like there are photographers who have kind of like their bread and butter, they're a football photographer. So that's kind of what they focus on. But it seems like everybody does everything. So you're absolutely right. Sports are year round, whether it's, if you're primarily football, you're shooting September through January, maybe, let's call it. And, but then you have outdoor track starting up, or you have softball starting up, and everything just kind of rolls into the next. And the way that you illustrated it is something that I never really thought of, and that you really don't get a break unless you are purposely saying, I'm going to take out this time, to go on vacation, or to take care of myself, or to see my family, or whatever the case is. That's really interesting, because I never really thought about it that way, but you're absolutely right.
Yeah. And even think about like the people that just photograph one sport, right? Like even let's use football and basketball as an example. Yes, the season goes from this month to this month, but after that, you're photographing any charity events, or any not charity events, what do you call that? Community service.
Yeah.
You're photographing any coaching camp.
Yeah.
Any coaching change. Like, it's basically year round.
Yeah.
So there's really no off button. And, I think that's why you see a lot of creatives in general leaving the industry, because they're burned out.
Yeah.
So I definitely think that's one thing that, I hope through conversations and through all these professional athletes and all these people speaking up about it, that it improves and it continues to get better, because there's a lot of talent out there.
Yes.
that I would love to see stay, and I would hate to see leave. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, no, I got you. And kind of piggybacking off of that last part that you said, I spoke with somebody recently, and what I told them was, again, in a lot of these conversations here, my conversations on social media and Twitter and things like that, I feel like the sports photography, videography, even the like social media, I feel like it's such a tight knit group, where everybody kind of supports each other. Everybody's willing to offer advice and constructive criticism and willing to make things work. And, you know, to hear you say there's all these people that I would love to stay, it's because and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it seems like it's because you appreciate what they do, first and foremost. But then secondly, there's just still so much more room for photography, videography, social media, like for growth, that you want to see the good people stay. You want retention. So again, that's so interesting, because I never thought about it that way.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the creative community is pretty close. You know, it starts out with a Twitter follow, right?
Yep.
For the most part, or like an Instagram follow, but then it slowly turns into casual conversations.
Yeah.
It turns into, this person's your connection for a job.
Yeah.
It turns into, hey, this person's all of a sudden your best friend. Like, I've found amazing friends just through social media. And honestly, yeah, like you said it best, you know, there's a lot of potential and there's a lot of room to grow. So I would hate to see these talented people leave just because they're being burnt out. You know, it's better for me to say, oh, I'm leaving because, you know, it's no longer like my passion, or, you know, I'm just chasing different ventures. It's another to hear, hey, I'm leaving because I'm just burnt out.
Yeah.
Like, that just hits different, you know. It doesn't even sound like fun. Like, obviously it's not fun, but like, it's like, dang, I don't ever want to hear that from someone.
Yeah.
But I think we've all kind of been at a point where you almost feel burnt out. If you've worked in sports, I feel like you've gone to that point. Yeah. One of these days, like eventually.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, and I don't know if you're going to have an answer on this, but how does a creative avoid the inevitable burnout? Is it just I'll let you answer. How does the creative avoid the inevitable burnout?
I don't know if there's an answer. I don't know if I can give you an answer. I don't think there's a way to avoid it. I think you'll feel burnt out just eventually, just because of the nature of how things are.
Sure.
Because there's so many games, there's so many sports. One thing I will say that would probably help is expanding your teams. When you're 18, 19 teams deep and you only have one photographer, and I'm speaking mainly, you know, college right now, which is what I know.
Sure.
Then yes, obviously that photographer at some point is gonna be like, hey, I'm burnt out. Because if they don't have any help, like maybe they have a whole army of interns or they have somebody else, that's great. That's the way it should be. But I think that would be my answer. How do you avoid it? Well, I think it starts from all the way up top. It starts with, okay, you have to make sure your team is you know, how do I put this? Your team is equipped enough.
Sure.
You know, that you have a well-balanced staff to be able to try to at least try to avoid it.
Yeah.
Now, I feel like it's going to happen because, again, we all work long hours. You know, there's not a single person in sports that I feel like works normal hours.
Sure.
If you're within the sport, you're going to work these long hours. And I'm not saying that's necessarily correct, but just I think that's the one way you kind of try to avoid it. It's just making sure your staff is adequately, built for it.
Gotcha.
That'd be my best answer, but I know it's not the best answer.
Yeah, again, there definitely wasn't a correct answer.
Yeah.
Again, I was really just trying to pick your brain and see what you think, because the way that I see it from the outside looking in, it seems so simple, but it's like you do have to make time for yourself. You do need to go on vacation. But like at the same time, and like without getting into like numbers and things like that, my assumption is if you're not working, you're not getting paid, correct?
Yeah.
So, at some point you kind of have to balance that too. Like, do I want to take a month off and not have any income, or, a lot less income, or whatever the case is? There's a lot of things at play. There's a lot of variables. So
yeah, and I think even the slight difference of those without, family, as far as like wife, kids, and those who do have wife and children, or children, whatever, because the money difference, right?
Yeah.
Like it probably takes a little less money for me to maintain myself one by myself, versus it would take me to maintain myself, my children, help out my wife, or my wife help me out, so
Absolutely.
I think a lot of that goes into it as well.
Gotcha. It makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. What's the biggest or most important, most significant maybe, thing that you've learned through this process? And I don't necessarily mean photography specifically, but even your graphic design, life lesson. What's the biggest thing that you've learned from your work?
I'd say connections matter.
Sure.
Connections matter. The way you approach people matters. Who you are as a person matters. I've seen people that are trying to get into this profession, this industry, and I've seen them either posting just some wild stuff on social media, like
Sure.
the inappropriate stuff, and you're like, hey, just FYI, social media matters in this type of job. Like, yes, there's a time and a place, and there are things that are funny, right? But there's obviously this whole other side of inappropriateness. Like, there's a very fine line between funny and inappropriate, and I've seen people just cross that, at least in my opinion, right? So to me, that matters, and the connections, and just the way you approach people. It's one thing to approach someone or message someone and be like, hey, I really like your work, would love to hop on a phone call with you and just chat it up, get to know a little bit more about you and your process, and you get to know me a little bit more, versus telling someone, hey, I want your job. What do I do to get your job?
Gotcha.
I respect the fact that you want my job.
Yeah.
But that's not the way to approach it.
Absolutely.
Try to get to know the person a little bit more, try to talk about the process and what that person went through, so you can understand how that person got their job.
Yeah.
And then maybe that person has some advice or has a connection that can help you get your foot in, because sports is big time about connections.
Yeah.
So that's what I would say.
Okay. And I know you've been at 3 locations so far. You've been at Miami for the U for a few years now. Yes. What's next for you? Do you want to stay at University of Miami? Do you want to go on to professional sports? What's on the horizon for you?
Honestly, I'm enjoying my time at Miami. I definitely want to want to do the best job possible here, right? For however long that may be. I can't tell you right off the bat, hey, I'm gone in 2 days. Peace out.
Yeah.
Nah, or I'm gonna be here for 20 years. I think, I gotta let God handle that one and his process. But definitely I want to see myself in the future. A dream of mine is to work in the pros. That's like a dream job. So ultimately I hope I get that opportunity, and I hope I get the opportunity to be a creative director somewhere. Whether
I could definitely see that.
Whether that's at Miami, whether that's at the pros, whether that's another college. Like I said, I let God handle those choices, but those are kind of like my aspirations. And yeah, I just want to make cool stuff, if I'm being honest. Whether that's in a graphic or a photo, I just want to make cool stuff and connect with people, because that's the main thing I like. I'm a people person, so. Absolutely.
And I'm wrapping up here. I absolutely appreciate you making some time to sit down. I know we've talked on a few occasions, just here and there on social media, on Instagram, and you've always been really cool about everything, just in terms of conversation. But just sitting here and listening to you talk, you are so humble about everything, just like humble roots, and it seems like your work ethic is through the roof. So the way I see it, I mean, I don't see why you wouldn't have that creative director, position at some point, someplace, or being in the pros or whatever. To me, it seems like you're inevitably going to get there. So I'm definitely excited. Absolutely. So I'm definitely excited to see what else you've got and what's on the horizons. But again, I absolutely appreciate you sitting down. Is there anything else you want to plug? I'll definitely have your Instagram and Twitter and the whole nine, but anything else going on? Anything that you want to let people know?
Well, honestly, the only thing I'm going to plug, and it's going to be a shout out, but it's because I have to shout out literally the staff, my coworkers, because you see a lot of my photos on Instagram, but a lot of those photos and graphics wouldn't be possible if I wouldn't get the opportunities from them, and we have some amazing people and amazing photographers at that, right? Photographers, videographers, content creators, just in general. So I just want to give them a big shout out, because, hey man, like, I'm probably the most active one on social media, they would say, but they're all dope. Like, gotcha. I got mad respect for them. So, and honestly, I appreciate you taking your time and inviting me on. It means a lot to me, to be able to tell a little bit of my story, and hopefully a lot of more kids from Puerto Rico start making their way, and designing and taking photos and just doing things, man. That's all I want.
Yeah, I love it, man. Hopefully we'll be able to do this again.
For sure.
Again, bigger and better to you, 2021 and beyond. Again, thank you again for sitting down, and we'll absolutely be in touch, I'm sure.
Nah, I appreciate it. Like I said, appreciate you, and sending you the biggest blessings, man. Thank you.
Appreciate it, man. Absolutely. Have a good one, bro.
All right, man. You too.